Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Kings Lynn and West Norfolk series based around Kings Lynn, Hunstanton and Downham Market. There's 101 of them in this one. Time to go walking. Hello everybody, welcome back to Kings Lynn and West Norfolk once again. Now this one is beginning at a church and according to this, it is open. That's a good start, isn't it? So let's head up this gravel drive. You know I don't like gravel. And head to the church. There it is, hiding away behind those trees. You'll find this church in the parish of Ringstead. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Just inland from the North Norfolk Coast, you'll find the lovely little village of Ringstead, located at the foot of a hill. Now, even though this one's not on the coast, it's still popular for a multitude of reasons. The village's name means ring place. This perhaps refers to a stone circle or some other kind of circular topographical feature. Although officially named just Ringstead, the parish council prefer the longer version of the name, Great Ringstead. Historically, this was to distinguish the village from Little Ringstead, which now no longer exists. There's a special section coming on that though later. The village is isolated. Although country lanes radiate to other neighbouring villages, there's no major roads and no direct route to Hunstanton via public transport. The last time Ringstead had a bus service was in 2018, when it was on the number 31's route from Fakenham to Hunstanton, which allowed for connections to Norwich. A lot of people flock to Ringstead for one reason: its most successful business. Since 1951, Ward's Nurseries, the brainchild of Edward Morris Ward, has been attracting customers from far and wide. The Ward's name was well known at local markets, where they traded for almost 70 years. And this one will end at Ringstead Downs, a peaceful spot where there's a former chalk quarry. There's so much to talk about in this corner of Norfolk, so without further ado, let's go and see it all. We begin at the Church of St Andrew, which is the only church that remains in Ringstead these days. That's because in the Middle Ages, there were two. In 1771 they were consolidated into one, and the Church of St Peter was abandoned. Only the Tower of St Peter's now survives, and we'll talk about that later. The surviving Church of St Andrew has a 13th century tower of its own. Its nave is 14th century, and its chancel is 15th century. The building was refurbished in the 18th century using materials from St Peter's Church, which was demolished in 1772. This was followed by a major restoration in 1864, which involved the partial rebuilding of the tower and the chancel's east wall, as well as the addition of a south aisle and a porch. Now, this may be the only church in Ringstead now, but St Peter's has not been forgotten. There's an outdoor service held annually on St Peter's Day in front of its ruined remains. So of course this one is being filmed not long after Easter, which is why here in this church, I would imagine, there is a mural with a cross on it. unless there's another reason for it, but I can't really think of one. There is a little information board underneath this. I wonder what this is all about. The 1970s painting on the west wall is by Mr. Roy Tuck, who taught art at the secondary school in Hunstanton. It portrays the scientific achievements and the social evils of the world at that time, many of which are still relevant today. In the centre, a pregnant woman, representing the future, looks to the cross, the only hope for humankind in a selfish world. Many people find this a worrying image to be displayed in a place of worship. However, we believe that Jesus Christ came to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. Please do study the detail in the painting and use it as a foundation for prayer. Okay, so it's nothing to do with Easter then. But it is everything to do with life and society. I mean, blimey, it is quite a harrowing painting, quite frankly. But I actually agree with that little message, to use it as a basis for prayer. I think it's really good, to be honest with you. It's disturbing, but good at the same time. It's relevant, isn't it? I think that's basically what I'm trying to get across. So, I've never seen anything like that in a church before. It's brilliant, it really is. Okay, let's head out of the church then, and around the rest of the village. Right next to the church is Ringstead Playground. I can't tell you how tempted I was to make my way back to the road using that slide you can see. I resisted temptation. Next, it's an old school. This was built in 1852 as a 2-room hall classroom with a separate infants room and attached teachers room. The buildings are constructed in a Gothic style from cast-stone rubble. It closed in 1985 and was converted into a furniture showroom. It's now a house. Down the hill we come to the general store. This occupies the original village shop, which has been here since the 1800s. It proudly sells local Norfolk products, including Norfolk Ale. Nice. On the wall is a parish notice board. Note the Great Ringstead name. Mark it off, folks, Ringstead is in the books. Beyond this, you then pass the old bakery, which ceased to be in 1964. It's now a holiday let, and I've linked a website below that shows you its gorgeous interior. Now we need to take a left turn here along Foundry Lane. I suspect this next part of the video is not going to be very interesting because it's mainly all residential as far as I can tell. But you never know, you never know. Let's head down here and find out. On the corner of Foundry Lane is Ward's Nurseries. This is a popular garden centre that stocks a wide range of plants and compost. Most of their products are grown on site. They deliver in the local area too for a small fee. Established in 1951, Ward's Nurseries has become one of Ringstead's most successful businesses, and if you want an idea of just how popular this is, check out the row of cars outside it. I'm telling you, there's no way all of these people live on Foundry Lane. Oh, by the way, Foundry Lane gets its name thanks to this building. This is the old foundry, which was marked on an 1824 OS map as a smithy. It's now a house. Also, on the subject of names, you'll find a lot of Norfolk street names end in the word Pittle. This, for example, is Goldspittle off Foundry Lane. The word Pittle is Anglo-Saxon, and it means a small plot of land, usually a field or some other kind of enclosure. It's most prevalently used here in East Anglia. This little triangle of grass is not the easiest place to stand to record a shot, but I don't see I've got anywhere else to stand, quite frankly. Okay, so you can see behind me Docking Road. The village carries on down there. It's a linear part of the village, so it's not on the route. Just thought I'd mention it at this point, just so it's not left out. We're heading this way though. Get out from under this tree, and we're heading towards the pub next. Apart from St Andrew's Church and what remains of St Peter's, Ringstead has 14 other listed buildings. Most of them are farmhouses, but they also include a windmill. It's not on our route as it's some way north of the village, but I have included a picture of it right here. The village's pub is also one of the listed buildings, and we're heading for that via Docking Lane. This building here is another one. This is the 16th and 17th century East End farmhouse, which is still in use today as a working farm. As the road bends back to the high street, we come to the village hall. It's used for a multitude of things, from keep fit classes to private parties and conferences. And being next to the pub is advantageous too. It means that refreshments on a larger scale are on hand here if they're required. The pub's name is the Gin Trap Inn. It's a former coaching inn, and it's been serving farmers, traders, fishermen, and even smugglers since 1668. Okay, so we turn around here at the Gin Trap Inn and we go back the way we came briefly. We're making the last little loop around this village now. We're going to head on to Chapel Lane, which will take us back to virtually where we started. Nice little place this. I'm really enjoying this walk. By following the Peddar's Way for a short time, we come to a small duck pond on the corner of Hall Lane. There were a few local residents in here. Hall Lane is a private road for much of its length. There isn't a lot down there anyway, as far as I can tell. It's just a dead end with a few farm buildings. Luckily for us though, there's a handy little grass footpath which links Hall Lane to Chapel Lane, and this will create a little loop to complete the village's circuit. Chapel Lane is much the same as the rest of the village, narrow with no footpath and lined with some old cottages. That said, there are some new builds which are being constructed along here. They're just out of shot here to the right. Our last landmark is the chapel that this street is named for. It's a former primitive Methodist chapel which is now a house. It was opened in 1867, and in 1922 a Sunday school was added to it as well. And here at the chapel, that marks virtually the end of our route. All I've got to do now is walk to the car, which is parked outside the shop, which we saw earlier, literally just a few paces that away. And that's the main walk around Ringstead complete. But we are not finished with Ringstead Parish, because there's still something else within its boundaries that's well worth seeing, and that would be Ringstead Downs. Ringstead Downs lie to the village's southwest. A nature reserve, this is a partly wooded dry chalk valley, important for its unimproved chalk grassland. You can walk all the way through this to Hunstanton via a permissive footpath. Ringstead Downs is managed by the Norfolk Wildlife Trust. The valley was carved out by glacial meltwaters. It's species rich because it's never been ploughed, and it's the largest surviving area of chalk downland in the county. Here we are in what's known as the Chalk Pit. This used to be a chalk quarry once upon a time. After use as a quarry, the pit was neglected and became overgrown. In 2011, volunteers set to work to turn it into what it is today, a 3-acre big beauty spot. The volunteers were also aided by a grant of over £3,500 from the Big Lottery Fund. Even today though, there aren't a lot of people out there who know this is here. As mentioned in the intro, there was a second Ringstead. To the west of Downs Farm, and now within the parish of Old Hunstanton, is Little Ringstead. It's a deserted medieval village and goes by two other names, these being Barrett Ringstead and Ringstead Parva. The lost village also once had a church dedicated to St Andrew. That is now the only building which survives, albeit as a roofless ruin in an arable field. The remains are 13th century and are believed to comprise the chancel of what was a larger church. The village was depopulated by the plague in 1349, but the church continued as a private chapel until it was converted into a barn in the 17th century. The ruin remains a Grade 2 listed building. All of this, by the way, is inaccessible because it's on private land. So too is Ringstead's other ruined church. Shown here is the Tower of St Peter's, which is all that survives in a private garden off Hall Lane. Well, what a beautiful little idyllic spot to end not just the parish of Ringstead, but also my little foray for the first time into King's Lynn and West Norfolk. This is the last of the 9 episodes that's in this little run you've seen over the past few weeks, and I've enjoyed every single step. I'll be back to Norfolk soon. I don't know whether it'll be around King's Lynn. It may well be in other places, for example Yarmouth, or maybe Broadland or Breckland. I don't know. It's kind of one of those things that gets planned when it gets planned. But of course, make no mistake, I will be coming back to Norfolk soon. For now, this has been the parish of Ringstead, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.